meh. Alright, so there's a new Star Trek series in town. It's called Star Trek Picard. And I watched episode 1 of it. Now, I'm not the world's greatest Star Trek fan. I was a big fan of Star Trek The Next Generation when it came out when I was like 12 or something. And I watched a couple of the movies. I watched a fair bit of Deep Space Nine. But I never really watched much of Voyager, and I never watched any of Enterprise. And I'm not hugely familiar with the original series, so there's my credentials out of the way. So Picard is apparently adjacent to the Next Generation series, like it's not a direct follow-on. Apparently there's licensing issues where they can only be so close to the original source material. So Picard begins with Picard, funnily enough, having sleep issues. So at the moment he's living on his family chateau, Chateau Picard in France. So he has a bad dream about playing poker with Data and Mars blowing up. And then we're off to Boston, where there's a woman who we come to know as Dahj, and she's having drinks with some man. So her and this fella are drinking wine, and he gets up to get us some more wine, and there's some orchids on the desk, and the stamens like retract inside themselves. I don't know what's going on there. And she has this necklace that she keeps like, oh, my necklace, and she keeps touching it all the time. It's weird. So 3 dudes in biker gear beam into her apartment and they throw a knife and kill her boyfriend or whatever he is. And then they rough her up a bit and they're asking like, has she been activated? And then they say, just knock her out. But before they knock her out, they put a pillowcase over her head. And that pillowcase being put over her head, like, activates her. And she whoops their butts. They're also asking her where the others are. I don't know who the others are. So it's kind of like Jason Bourne from The Bourne Identity and its sequels. And she gets a vision of Jean-Luc Picard's face for some reason. So then we go back to Chateau Picard, and Picard has a dog which he calls Number 1. It's a big bloody staffy or something. And he also has 2 Romulans living with him for some reason. I'm assuming they're Romulans. Sometimes it's hard to tell between a Romulan and a Vulcan, but I'm going to go with Romulans here. So apparently he has some interview with some TV station and they tell him that they've been notified that they're not allowed to ask about his retirement. But, of course, the interviewer is a muckraker from some sort of gotcha tabloid journalist, and she goads him into talking about his retirement. So we learn in this scene that there was a supernova near Romulus, and they decide that they're going to evacuate 900 million Romulans and disperse them somewhere away from the supernova, which is like basically anywhere in the galaxy except for that one solar system. So apparently some synthetics went nuts and attacked Mars. I don't know what Mars has to do with it. Maybe there was a shipbuilding yard in Mars and they were building the ships to evacuate the Romulans from Romulus. And apparently during the attack, the synthetics set the Martian atmosphere on fire. I don't know why it's on fire or how. Is it like methane or something? Like, wouldn't it? I don't know. It makes no sense to me. And due to this, there is now a ban on synthetics. So, artificial humans, basically. And this interviewer basically goads Jean-Luc Picard into talking about his retirement. And he just says, you weren't there. You don't know what it's like. So you can go to hell. And luckily, Dahj was attacked on the same night that Picard was interviewed because she sees his face on the TV and she's like, oh yeah, that's that guy that I had in that vision. So I guess it's the future now and they can just teleport across the planet because Dahj rocks up in France all the way from being in Boston and she has a big gash on her forehead. So it can't have been too much later after she was attacked. And it gets me to thinking that like she knew that the guy on the TV was the guy in her visions. So she got Jean-Luc Picard's name from the TV report. But how did she know where he lived? So she just turns up while he's having a glass of wine. And the dog runs off and like attacks her. But it just licks her hand And she goes nuts, like telling him about how, she was attacked and I didn't know where to go and I thought I'd better come here. And he seems fairly comfortable with that. I would have thought that he'd be like, whoa, who is this nutcase that's just lobbed up on my doorstep? And she says this weird line about how when she realized she could do all these kung fu moves that it was like lightning seeking the ground. I don't know how that relates to it. Like, killing them was the shortest route to getting out of there alive, maybe? The path of least resistance? I would have thought fleeing would be the path of least resistance, but here we are. So then Picard gets to talking to her and he says that she can stay the night, and he asks her about her necklace, and the necklace is like 2 circles intertwined like that, I guess. You know what? I could probably put a picture of it up here. So they're making a big song and dance about this necklace. And she asks Picard, have you ever been a stranger to yourself? Like, no one speaks this way. It's too flowery. They're going too far with the writing. So then Picard has a dream about Commander Data painting a picture in his vineyard, and Data hands him the brush and says, like, do you want to finish? And he's like, no, I can't. And he's like, yeah, you can. You know how to finish this painting. And I thought it was odd because I would have thought Data would like do dot matrix, like line by line painting. But I guess maybe he's learned to be more human-like and do like delicate dabs of paint here and there. So then after this dream, Picard wakes up and he gets it in his head that he has to go and look at a painting that he has in his office. So he looks at this painting and it's of like a figure standing with a shawl or a hood on, and you can't see their face. And he's like, no. And I'm like, why? Like, what? The painting's finished. Like, what are you upset about? Soon to be revealed. So then the 2 Romulans come in and tell Picard that the visitor, Dahj, has left. And they said that, like, they just found her room open. So Picard says, I'm off. I'm going to Starfleet archives. So there's an archive in this museum of the Enterprise and Captain Picard and all this sort of stuff. And they have the Captain Picard Day banner, which I thought was a little bit weird because wouldn't that have just been like a sheet of paper that the kids were drawing on and not like a permanent relic? Wouldn't it have been destroyed like when the Enterprise crashed to Earth? So he's going through the archive and he gets the archive to beam in one relic from the archive, and it is a painting. And it is the same painting that Data was painting, except this time the figure is facing the artist and you can see their face. And it is the exact same face as Dahj. So Picard calls up the Index and this like hologrammatic person appears and he says to them, you know, what's the deal with this painting? And the Index is like, well, the painting was painted by Commander Data and the painting is called Daughter. So then Dahj is in some alleyway and she calls up her mum. But then she's going on about how she was attacked and how she had to flee. And then the mum says something about like, you should go back to Picard's house. And she's like, I never told you that I went to Picard's house. Like, what's going on here? This is weird. And she's like, yeah, you did. You must have told me because how else would I know? So she says that she had to leave because she couldn't risk anyone else getting hurt because of her. And then her mum says, like, find Picard. And she closes her eyes and she, like, remembers Picard's face. And then she, like, opens them again and starts on her phone, like, hacking Starfleet. Pretty good effort. So she teleports, I guess, immediately over to San Francisco. I assume it's San Francisco because it has that Golden Gate Bridge. Golden Gate Time Bridge. And she's like, Picard. And he's like, oh man, how'd you find me? And she sits him down and she's like, oh, I don't know what's going on. And he's like, I know what's going on. You're the daughter of a robot. And of course she's like, nah, I was born in like, I don't know where she was born. I have a family, I have a father. And he's like, no, you've got all these skills. You knew who I was because you've got like the memories of Data. And then she senses that the assassins are back. And she tells Picard he's got to get up and go. So they run up to the roof, and Picard's stunt double does a pretty good job of like hobbling like an old man. But it's okay because the assassins they sent are all stormtroopers and they can't hit the side of a barn. I mean, they've got an open shot on Picard and Dahj running away from them, and they miss. Unless they meant to miss to keep the story going. So Dahj does some like karate moves and backflips and suplexes, and then she does 150-meter super dash jump over the staircase and whips two other assassins who've teleported in. And then one of their helmets falls off, and it's like they're Romulans or Vulcans, who knows? So she punches one in the face, and he spits green goop on her, and it's acidic. I don't know if he has acidic blood, or if maybe, perhaps, perchance, it's like a suicide capsule or something. Bite onto it and you'll dissolve. So the acid gets all over Dahj and this gun that she's holding that she got off the attackers. And the gun starts overheating and explodes. Kabamo! And Picard is thrown like 50 feet backwards. Like he would have broke his back or his hip or cracked his skull on the pavement and died. But luckily all he needs is a good lie down. And then he says, oh, I should have done more. It's like, but how could you have done more? You're a doddering old man. And he says that, he's got to do something, and hasn't been living, he's been waiting to die. More good writing there. So he goes to the Daystrom Institute in Okinawa. And B4 is in a drawer. Now, I'm not too familiar with B4. I'm more familiar with Law and Lal. But apparently B4 is like a prototype, or was B4 a second attempt at recreating Data? I don't know. But this scientist says that Data was trying to stuff his mind into B4's mind as a backup. But now they don't know where B4's mind is. And luckily Picard still has Dahj's necklace. And he's like, can you tell me what this symbol represents? And she's like, oh, that symbol represents fractal neuronic cloning. Which apparently means that if you get a tiny bit of Data's brain, then you can recreate the whole from it. As in his whole brain, not just a hole in the ground or something. And the scientist says that if Dahj was destroyed, then he has to find the second one because they're created in pairs. Like, I don't know, why would they be created in pairs? Like, who manufactures things in pairs? Except for genes. And then we see what I assume is a Romulan warbird. And it flies through some defense field and into like a hangar thing. And this guy gets off it and he's like a badass mofo. And he introduces himself to a woman as Narek. And it turns out that it's the exact copy of Dahj. And she says her name is Soji. So that must be Soji and Dahj are sisters? Twins, maybe? Unless there's like 5,000 of them, and then it doesn't matter. But they both have the necklace. But that necklace is so simple, and it could just be replicated like a million times. I mean, this is a society with replicators. But of course she's sitting there like this. Oh, look at my necklace. Oh, look at it. Oh, I'm just playing with it nonchalantly. And that Narek guy, like, his face looks like it's a deep fake. Like, it's weird. And then the camera zooms out and it turns out they're in a Borg cube. So the Romulans have a Borg cube, apparently. And then I get a ton of spoilers. There's one of those, this season on Picard. And it just goes through the entire plot. Well, maybe not the entire plot, but there's massive spoilers that I'm like, okay, that defeats the purpose of that plot line. And no, there's no Whoopi Goldberg, and there's no Guinan, so stop asking. So this episode has a lot of like conveniences, like Dahj is attacked exactly on the day that Picard is interviewed. That's a bit of a convenience. I find it weird that Picard has these two Romulans hanging around and they basically do nothing except for serve him. Like, are they indentured servants or something? Has Picard reinstated slavery? So there's nothing really about this episode that really grabbed me and made me want to watch the next episode. So I'm going to say that this episode is a 6 out of 10. Now, this is a 10 episode season, so I'm going to give it 4 episodes. Maybe it just needs time to build the backstory and build the world. The effects look brilliant. That's always a good thing. What else is there? There's not really much to say about this episode. It was pretty flat. You've got a month, and then I'm out. So you're an adult, come on. You know whether you want to like, you know whether you want to comment, you know whether you want to subscribe. I'll leave it up to you.